Hello, I'm Rosie Teal and I write character-driven fiction. I thought I'd give you an opportunity to have a flavour of my work, and so I'm going to serialise a number of stories which I hope you will enjoy. If you have any interest in them or would like to know more about them or me, you can either follow me on Facebook or email me, Rosie, Rosy, Teal, Teale, @gmail.com. I'm going to start with a story called The Misfits, which will be told in 4 parts. It's a light-hearted little romp, and what you need to do is suspend belief, if you will, as Disney encounters Animal Farm. Nobody could ever have dreamed up the happy chaos that was Sunflower Farm. The name itself conjured up a rural idyll as tranquil as it was beautiful. However, anyone who saw it would add unconventional to their descriptions. Dolly O'Brien and her husband Desmond had purchased the place 5 years ago from their lottery winnings. Being the single winning ticket holders of the biggest rollover in the history of the lottery, the purchase of the beautiful but slightly run-down property with its 100 acres in the middle of the lush Devon countryside hadn't even dented their capital reserves, and they'd happily set about making the place home, not just for themselves, but for waifs and strays of all descriptions. Great animal lovers, that all their lives they decided to realise their dream of having their very own animal sanctuary. Various animals turned up on their doorstep in varying degrees of distress. All received the very best care. There was a lot of crying at Sunflower Farm, tears of joy when sick or injured animals recovered and were either returned to the wild or rehomed. Copious tears when one just didn't make it through. Not all the animals left though, and as such, a very odd assortment of residents were to be found rubbing shoulders and paws side by side. Take Rufus, for example. Magnificent beast, and the first of the more exotic creatures to land on his ample paws with the O'Briens. Rufus's big problem was that he found meat repellent. Now, a lot of people find meat repellent, and many animals have evolved to eat nuts, cereals, grains, fruits and vegetables. Your average male lion, however, is not commonly found to be a vegetarian. Such was the need to monitor his diet minutely and regularly supplement with vitamins, minerals and other essentials for a healthy life, the Paignton Zoo, which had imported Rufus with a view to starting a breeding programme, turned to the O'Briens for help. Within short order, such are the benefits of having an almost bottomless pit of money to draw on, a fine pen had been designed and built for Rufus, though it was quickly apparent that this was indeed the friendliest of lions, and he soon just became a big cuddly cat rather than a ferocious beast. "I still can't get over you being veggie," twittered Biggles, a very beautiful blue tit who sat on one of Rufus's enormous paws, nonchalantly preening himself. Biggles and Rufus were good friends. Biggles understood completely Rufus's repulsion of meat. Biggles, after all, was that rare bird with no head for heights. His parents had despaired when, as all the other chicks in their brood hopped off the edge of the nest, flexed their wings and flapped away, Biggles remained as far back in the nest as he could get, flatly refusing to venture forth and squeaking and shaking as no amount of parental coaxing could persuade him to venture out. Deciding that desperate measures were called for, his father hopped into the nest and pushed Biggles out, whilst his mother hovered nervously awaiting her latest offspring's first flight. Reeling with dizziness, Biggles spread his wings and plummeted to the ground, with both horrified parents flying around, chirping for all they were worth. "Flap, flap, flap your wings!" By some miracle, Biggles did, eventually, managing to land in one piece, on Rufus's head. Biggles' parents squawked aghast. Clearly this little chick was not meant to survive. Rufus shook his head gently. Had he got something in his fur? Biggles dug his little claws in and squawked. "Oi!" he said, in a very untit-like manner. Rufus cocked an ear. "Did someone squeak?" he bellowed, but not in an unfriendly way. Biggles was very uncertain. He was jolly grateful for the soft, warm landing. He didn't know what he'd landed on, but it was very welcoming. Where was the noise coming from? Rufus stretched out a paw. "Whoever you are up there on my head, hop down here. Let's have a look at you." Biggles looked up at his parents, still flapping and hovering in alarm. Wherever he was now, he felt a lot more comfortable than where he had come from. What kind of parents kicked their poor offspring out of the comfort and security of their own nest, for heaven's sake? He chirruped up at them. "See them! Don't worry about me. I'll be fine down here." And with a wave of his wing, he sent them on their way, rounding up the other chicks. He wasn't entirely sure he'd done the right thing when he found himself perched on Rufus's paw, gazing up at the great leonine face, and when Rufus yawned, revealing a great cavernous mouth full of very sharp-looking teeth. Biggles felt he really was in trouble. "Oh," said the languid Rufus, "you're a pretty little thing, aren't you? Where have you come from?" Biggles still wasn't too sure of himself. "You aren't going to eat me, are you?" he asked timorously. "There's not much meat on me, and my feathers probably won't taste very nice, and I really don't want to die." Rufus threw his head back and roared with laughter. Biggles jumped. Maybe he should try flapping his wings and get out of here. But he was paralysed with fear. "Don't worry, little chap," said Rufus, looking down at the little bird and speaking gently. "I'm not going to eat you. It's not very good for my street cred, but, actually, I'm a vegetarian." It took a moment for Biggles to digest this. "But aren't you a lion?" he asked, having had the opportunity to survey his host. "Yes," said Rufus, "and a damn fine lion I am too, but I can't stomach the thought of meat. It was the ultimate cruelty when my mother tried to force it on me." Biggles sat back, digesting this little snippet of information. Well, at least he wasn't about to become a lion's tasty titbit, so to speak. "I can't stand heights," he ventured, not sure how this piece of information was going to be received. Rufus looked at him, then once again threw back his magnificent head and roared with laughter. "Oh, my little chap," he said, pausing for breath, "I think you'll probably fit in very well here." And Biggles did. He spent a lot of time with Rufus. Rufus was, after all, a very comfy place to settle. With Rufus's encouragement, he eventually managed to fly around at a fairly low level, which even he had to admit was fairly pleasurable, and gave him a degree of self-respect. Tit style. Rufus also introduced him to other residents at Sunflower Farm, and Biggles was quick to see how right Rufus was when he said that he, Biggles, would fit in well there. Dilys and Dermot were a duck and a drake that both had a marked dislike of cold water. They would swim at a push, but only on their special pond which the O'Briens had installed, which was heated to a suitable temperature, all solar-powered, of course. This enabled Dilys and Dermot to do what all ducks do, but in more temperate conditions. They were joined by Civil, the swan who also enjoyed the warmth of their pond, but who hated putting her head under the water. Who ever heard of a swan who didn't stick their head under the water? Well, here at Sunflower Farm, anyone who ever came across Sybil suddenly did. Bob and Pip, however, were a slightly different matter. They were the resident Jack Russells, Dolly's chosen pets, who were doted on to the point of lunacy in the opinion of some of the other residents. However, you couldn't help but like the pair, brothers as different as chalk and cheese. And whilst enjoying their position as Dolly's best boys, they also enjoyed the company of the various misfits that were the residents of Sunflower Farm. Biggles resumed his discussion with Rufus alongside his preening. You never knew. A female tit might settle at Sunflower Farm. It paid to be prepared. "What is it about meat you couldn't stomach?" he asked. Rufus shuddered, causing Biggles to temporarily lose his balance. "I don't know," he replied. I know it's entirely unnatural, but the moment my mother stopped giving me the milk I liked so much and pushed a carcass towards me," he shuddered again, "I just couldn't face it." Said Biggles, sorting out a particularly difficult bunch of feathers to his satisfaction. "I can understand it. I mean, I will tolerate the occasional grub, but I do much prefer a nice string of peanuts." "So we see," commented Rufus dryly, for it had to be said that little Biggles had more than blossomed in his time at Sunflower Farm. Dolly and Desmond always put loads of food out for birds, not just young Biggles, who'd quickly been accepted as the resident tit, but for any birds who passed their way. If Biggles had had difficulty flying before he landed on Rufus that fateful day, he certainly had further difficulties now, as he developed into quite a little podge. They were interrupted as loud quacking announced the ungainly arrival of Dilys and Dermot, waddling into view, hotly pursued by Bob and Pip. These two were as different as it is possible to be, yet were so close to each other. Pip was small and incredibly cute, his fluffy white coat interrupted by black patches on his face and his ears. Pip was a true adolescent. Sex was never far from his mind, and he worried constantly about how he looked and what people thought of him. Bob was much bigger, brown patches in lieu of Pip's black ones, but his approach to life was so different. He was a great giver, was devoted to Dolly, but also constantly keeping an eye out for his comparatively delinquent brother. They didn't get taken for walks too frequently, on account of Pip's antisocial behaviour, where other dogs, or indeed people he didn't much like the look of, crossed his path. But they roamed freely around the farm, and were great pals with all the residents, so their days were full. Pip overtook Dilys and Dermot and skidded to a halt in front of Rufus. "Beat you! Beat you!" he taunted them as they waddled the final few feet. "Oh, do shut up, Pip," quacked Dermot good-naturedly. "You know we would have floored you if we could have been bothered to take off." Bobby settled alongside his brother. "Don't wind them up," he said. "There's too much else to think about." Pip gave a gentle puff and settled on his backside, tail wagging, bottom teeth exposed, with a hint of his little pink tongue showing, the picture of innocence to the uninitiated. Bob gave him a further warning look. Biggles had finished preening and gave a very brave little flight around the assembled group before landing alongside the ducks, who sat down recovering their breath after their exertions. "Something up?" he asked, noting that the Jack Russells had something of an air of excitement about them. "Up!" squeaked Pip. "Up! I'll tell you what's up." Bob interrupted him. "No, you won't, Pip. You'll get it all garbled like you always do." "I do not get things garbled," spluttered Pip. "Actually," said Rufus, bored with the argument and wanting to know what was up, as something clearly was, "you do, Pip." Pip looked crestfallen, as he often did if he thought he was being criticised. Rufus recognised the look and added quickly, because Pip really was a sweet soul, "But nobody holds it against you. We just want to know what's going on." Pip, feeling mollified, lay down and stretched out with his head resting on his paws in front of him. Bob was grateful for the intervention. He loved his brother to bits, but he could be a real pain sometimes. All eyes were on him. "We've got a new arrival," he announced to the expectant company. "And?" they chorused, because at Sunflower Farm this was not unusual by any means. A new arrival was an everyday occurrence. "This one's permanent," said Bob. Now this merited further interest. It was not often that it was taken as read that anyone was a permanent resident from day one. Bob noted their interest and leaned forward into the group conspiratorially. "It was either here or—" he paused dramatically, then lowered his voice. "The abattoir," he finished, eyes rolling for dramatic effect. He was not disappointed. A collective gasp of horror greeted his news, followed by some tweeting and quacking and snorting for good measure. "Who is it?" said Dilys. Pip Pip could contain himself no longer and, ignoring Bob's warning look, jumped back up onto all fours and announced, "His name's Boris. He's a bull. He's absolutely huge." He brandished a paw to indicate the extent of Boris's hugeness, then added, "And he won't perform." Perform? He sat back, waiting for the significance of what he'd said to sink in. Predictably, it was the juvenile Biggles who hadn't appreciated the significance of what Pip had said. "Perform?" repeated Biggles. "Is he supposed to sing or something?" There was a collective cry of scorn. "Biggles!" they cried. Rufus added, "Biggles, the whole point of a bull is that they're supposed to..." He coughed delicately. "Perform," he added with emphasis, as in, "you know." Pip, who was forever being accused of being sex-mad, could stand it no longer. Once more he was on all four paws. "He won't bonk, Biggles. He's declared himself a sex-free zone. He won't..." He paused and scanned the faces of his companions before adding, "Perform!" Then sat back down again. There was a collective "oh" as the penny dropped. Bobby picked up his thread. "Poor Boris just won't perform, do the necessary. You know how it is," he said. And that meant that poor old Boris, well, actually he isn't exactly old, but anyway, poor chap was going to be... He lowered his voice. Abattoir was a dirty word at Sunflower Farm. You know, disposed of. "Meat!" squeaked Pip, not wanting to be sidelined from imparting this important piece of news. "Steaks and Sunday joints and..." Rufus interrupted him. "Yes, Pip, we know. Thank you." So Pip sat back down again. Next time, we'll meet Boris and learn more about the misfits at Sunflower Farm. Hope you enjoyed it. Catch you soon. Bye for now.